in this world anymore! I am not a fan of the short circuit. Oh, Zesty's going on about the short circuit again. Why? It is an improperly balanced item that is not fun to play against, nor does it promote the skillful development of an engineer player. This is now my second attempt at tackling this argument, and I've had about a year to think over the aspects of my initial argument that I could have presented better, along with some additional points that I overlooked the first time around. So, hopefully, for the last time in video format, I am going to dare to say, those with weak constitutions turn away now. The current short circuit is not a well-balanced item, and here's why.
My rocket was destroyed today. I am very upset about it, but whoever destroyed it was more happy than I was sad to lose it. The total happiness in the world increased. So whatever, maggot. What in the commie crap was that?
Let the fucking bass.
In concept, the short circuit is a perfectly viable and fair weapon for the engineer. It's a tool that boosts his ability to protect himself and his nearby buildings, and previous versions of this weapon held true to that inherent purpose. It has two firing options. The primary attack is a rapid-fire little spurt of electricity that deals 10 damage per shot at the cost of 5 metal per shot, which is pretty weak and not worth using. The secondary fire option, which is what everyone uses this weapon for, fires an energy ball that deletes all projectiles that touch it, at the cost of 65 metal per shot. This orb also deals 15 damage, but can deal consecutive hits that stack to more damage over time. This weapon provides the engineer with an edge over his two biggest ranged adversaries, the soldier and the demo man, and this is perfectly fine. The engineer does need this type of tool. His only other option to protect his buildings, aside from simply moving them, is to heal them with the wrench or the rescue ranger. There is the wrangler, albeit the protection only applies to a sentry and it's brutally overpowered, but that's for another day. But the major problem with the current version of the short circuit is that it goes well beyond its original purpose of primarily protecting just the engineer and his buildings from nearby projectiles. Now it's for the engineer, his buildings, and his entire team over a fairly large area for a significant period of time without a fair trade-off to make use of it. Let me explain how this is a fairly overpowered mechanic. When you alt-fire the short circuit, you launch an orb that is 128 hammer units in diameter, or roughly 2.5 engineers wide. It moves at 896 hammer units per second, and in comparison to other projectiles, it's the slowest moving in the game. The orb lasts for exactly 1 second before disappearing, fixing its range to 896 hammer units. The orb's slow, linear motion creates this cylindrical area of effect by which no projectiles can pass through until the orb has disappeared. This entire area becomes a no-go zone for any projectiles. Not to mention, projectiles that are fired at angles highly non-parallel to the major axis of the cylinder can also be destroyed, so long as the orb is nearby. So what does this mean? For approximately 1 second, or just one shot, an engineer can provide a 100% resistance to projectiles for himself, his buildings, and his nearby team within or behind this area of effect. And if more than one orb is fired, especially in different directions, this significantly increases the duration and area of this 100% resistance. A bit of a side note here, the short circuit doesn't just destroy soldier rockets and sticky bombs. The short circuit's orbs delete every single projectile in the game, except for Righteous Bison and Pomson 6000 shots. Here is the full list, which includes support items as well. Now, for some reason, people thought I was being a salty soldier maid. Wow. Because the first time around, I emphasized how the soldier and demo man are effectively rendered useless by this weapon, which is true, but I think those viewers failed to realize just how strong this item is and had the knee-jerk reaction to insult me instead. But I did lack demonstration and example, so that's on me. That brief little caveat aside, this is what I want you to think about and take away from this demonstration. The problem with the short circuit isn't that it deletes projectiles, it's that it provides an easily achieved 100% resistance to projectile damage over a large area for a significant period of time at any time you so choose. It blocks way too much damage. If this 100% resistance was primarily for the engineer and his buildings as it was originally intended for the short circuit, or were it more difficult to achieve, then the short circuit wouldn't be an issue. It would be much more balanced than it is now. There is a very good reason why the short circuit is banned in most competitive TF2 leagues. In general, for video games, mechanics and items that provide provisional resistances or invincibility are typically very limited, simply because of how powerful they can be. They are either very rare, difficult to achieve, or require a considerable sacrifice in order to use them. Power stars in Mario are very rare. Buying the Temi armor in Undertale is a grueling grinding process if you aren't on a genocide run. And the stone ability in Kirby games doesn't let you move or attack while invincible, just to name a few. We have plenty of examples like this in TF2 as well. The medic's uber charge takes, at minimum, 40 seconds to build, which requires the medic to stay alive long enough and spread heals enough to get the uber. The bonk atomic punch makes the scout unable to attack, and he moves slower for all damage taken blocked while he's invincible. Demo Man shields make you sacrifice one of the most powerful damage dealing items in the game. Soldier banners make you sacrifice a shotgun and require damage charging to use, and good coordination from your team to make use of their effects. These are all well balanced examples of resistances and invincibility. But what about the short circuit? For 65 metal, the click of a button, and little aim to make use of, you, your buildings, and your entire nearby team are 100% protected from all projectiles whenever and wherever you so choose.
What?
Yes, you do sacrifice your pistol's chip damage, but that doesn't sound like a very fair trade-off, at least for me, for how influential this item can be for an engineer and his team. You don't even have to be close to the enemy team to delete their projectiles. There is zero risk in using this item.
Are you fucking me? I hate the fucking goddamn short circuit. Okay, I got it.
And this is why the previous version of the short circuit was better. Instead of a ranged moving orb, the secondary fire was a very short ranged attack that would delete nearby projectiles within your field of view. There was more risk involved with not dodging the oncoming projectiles and opting to try and delete them instead. It was a reactionary type of weapon rather than a precautionary weapon. You had to see the projectiles coming before you knew you could delete them. The old short circuit rewarded players by encouraging good timing and positioning to make the most out of the weapon rather than encouraging spam. The original purpose of the short circuit was to remove nearby projectiles that posed an immediate threat to the engineer, his team, and his buildings. But now, it goes well beyond that and becomes a tool that benefits his team more than himself, along with a greater ability to destroy all other projectiles from other classes, because of its relatively low cost, ease of use, and lasting area of effect. And yes, I understand the type of defensive support class the engineer is. He benefits his team with his dispenser, teleporters, and area denial, but giving him a tool that also shuts down incoming damage for his entire team within a large area by simply deleting it is just too strong. I would not have gone through all of this trouble to make this video without proposing some kind of fix for the current short circuit. I propose this. If people aren't too keen on keeping the orb, then I say simply revert the item back to its original state before the Blue Moon rework that gave it the orb in the first place. Which, by the way, was the first major rework that the item ever received in an almost 8-year lifespan up until that point. Why there was ever pressure to change it in the first place is beyond me. Considering this type of rework is highly unlikely to happen, here is a second option. Why not make the short circuit truer to its name. Rather than destroying projectiles, make them short circuit instead, by having their trajectory skewed by the orb, not like an air blast reflection, but more like a deflection. This would still prevent projectiles targeted at the engineer from reaching their mark, but also leave the damage open to affect other players. It's a much more interesting risk versus reward scenario for this item, at least I think, in that you can inadvertently screw over your own team while protecting yourself. And if people still aren't a fan of not being able to delete projectiles, then here is my third and final option. I say significantly decrease the range of the short circuit. Cut it in half, at least. This way, the short circuit is refocused back on protecting the engineer and his buildings rather than his entire team. I know these might not be the greatest ideas, maybe someone else can come up with something better. Let me know what you think might be a good rework for the short circuit in the comments below. And that's a wrap. Hopefully this time around I've managed to fully explain my distaste for the short circuit and why I think it isn't a fun, fair, or balanced item to play with, or play against. Yes, I am being a little bit more candid here with the face cam, but I wanted to have a little face-to-screen time chat with you to emphasize something. This video states my opinions about the short circuit and why I don't like the item. My opinions are not facts, nor are they law, so don't treat them as such. This video is actually about 20 minutes shorter than the original script that I had recorded. I wanted to keep this video as objective as possible, and for the sake of brevity, I cut out my more biased and subjective sections. However, I still feel like they are worth sharing and worth mentioning, so there's going to be a sort of follow-up part two, I guess, style video that contains the rest of that stuff soon following this one, so stay tuned for that as well. I want to close this video with a clip from Uncle Dane. It's from an old video of his talking about an older version of the short circuit, so take this with a grain of salt. But I find his thoughts on the item back then far more representative of the item now. So, here you go.
The way that the short circuit is intended to be used is to prevent your buildings from being destroyed by incoming demo spam or soldiers' rockets if you are quick enough and have good reaction time. However, the thing fires so quickly that you could essentially hold down M1 and not have to worry about any sort of timing and completely negate the main weapons of two different powerhouse classes. This ability can create some bad habits in aggressive engineers because it allows them to literally erase all incoming explosive damage with practically no real amount of skill. And because of this, it can be annoying to play against.
Isn't that so fun? You can't attack!